I'm rooting for Xdefiant to succeed in being a fun and competitive first-person shooter which can bring competition to dominant FPS franchises such as Call of Duty, so I was excited to check out the game's server test beta, and these are my thoughts after playing it as much as I could. Xdefiant is a fun game to play. Compared to Modern Warfare 3, the bloat has been stripped out, leaving a game that plays very similar to a classic Call of Duty game. It most closely resembles Black Ops 4, which is definitely a good thing. To better explain Xdefiant, the overall game pace is quick. Matches usually have plenty of engagements, the time to kill is very fast, and the almost instant respawn system, due to lack of kill cams, enables for a high action experience. So what about the weapons? Each weapon handles pretty well and were fun to explore in the beta. However, I think some weapon balancing is necessary. Based on my personal experience, the AK-47 is an absolute laser beam at all ranges, including up close, where it felt it outgunned some SMGs with the attachments that I had on. On the flip side, the MP5 and MP7 seem slightly weak at anything beyond close range. Gun recoil control in Xdefiant was a good balance between the arcade style of Call of Duty and the more simulation style system of Battlefield 2042, which I thought was a really good design choice for the style of game that Xdefiant seems to be going for. Besides guns, you have a choice of one throwable independent of your choice of faction, then a choice of 1 out of 2 abilities. The available options change per faction, and an ultimate ability which is tied to your faction of choice. There are no perks to pick, and the number of attachments is really reasonable compared to the 50 gazillion in Call of Duty games nowadays. It seemed pretty clear to me that the ability of choice was the BioVita Boost, or Stim Shot, which gave me Black Ops 4 vibes when more than half the lobby was using it all at once. It just seemed way more effective to have a Stim Shot ability than any of the other options, so I just stuck with what worked for the majority of the beta, although it did concern me that the ability was overpowered and needed nerfing. Ultimate abilities took a long time to acquire, so I only got one use of them close to the end of matches. This is fine, but it left little time for ultimate abilities to be used for much playmaking. It was also super refreshing to play an FPS that only had standard sprint, with no tactical sprint in sight. The slide ability was slow, which reduced the chances of this mechanic being abused or being cheap to use, so other than a few tweaks here and there, the gameplay of Xdefiant is pretty good indeed. It was cool how the available factions are made up from different Ubisoft franchises. Nice idea and works well at creating differing aesthetics for each team. This should definitely help with player identification in gameplay too. Available factions are from Watch Dogs 2, Far Cry 6, Ghost Recon and The Division 2. I was happy to see that map voting is included in the game, plus matchmaking didn't take long at all, so I could get into shooting noobs as soon as possible. I got to play a wide variety of maps in the beta and enjoyed playing on all of them, which makes a nice change. I'd definitely compare the map design to Black Ops Call of Duty games due to the vibrant colour palette and just the general vibes of the maps. Domination was very fun to play, and Occupy, which is Xdefiant's name for hardpoint, seemed decent. There was 3 other modes which barely came up, so I honestly couldn't comment on how those played. Some spawn logic could perhaps do with work though, as it was fairly easy to get into one of the enemy's spawn areas in Domination and pick off players as they spawned. I deliberately tried to do this to test the game and was surprised that the spawns didn't seem to rotate. Game performance seemed solid on PlayStation 5. I played using the 120 FPS option, which the game notes will drop resolution to maintain a high frame rate. Yet the game's image quality seemed nice and clean to my eyes with stable performance throughout my time playing. Not pushing any graphical boundaries, but good. My only big negative with the beta was that the battle announcer for at least one of the factions was buggy.
This kill streak you're on? Kind of legendary.
So for instance, I'd hear, this streak you're on is legendary. I've just died and respawned, so I'm not on a kill streak of anything right now. In other words, the voice lines don't match up with what's going on in game. Also, the frequency of battle chatter seemed too high with this same faction, which further added to its broken nature. The Xdefiant beta had some of the most bizarre default game settings I've seen in a long time. This made my initial couple of matches quite jarring. However, once I'd done plenty of tweaking to the game's settings, the game played far better and much more satisfying than those initial few matches were. Some of the settings include really high field of view, with dependent aim down sights field of view, which made aiming down the sights feel bloody odd. I was impressed that the game included settings such as reverse flashbang effect to save me getting blinded, but I was disappointed that the game lacked tinnitus sound reduction, along with the ability to swap the melee and crouch buttons around. This in particular definitely caused havoc with my controller muscle memory. Also, by default, the in-game UI is more centralised than in other FPS games. I didn't actually notice this until watching back my gameplay footage, but I did notice in-game that I could see all the key information within my peripheral vision, rather than diverting my eyes towards the edges of the screen. After the beta concluded, I wanted to play more matches, try out more of the guns and modes that I didn't get proper chance to try out. So I'm glad that the full game launches on the 21st of May. I can't wait to check it out on release.